Welcome back to the currently incomplete guide to characters. Oh, I'm gonna have to change all these thumbnails once this series is complete, aren't I? I want to start today by asking a simple question about the characters in your story. Why are they there? I know last week we talked about why characters exist at all. This week isn't about that. It's more about why a specific character is part of a story. In most stories, characters go through hell. There's all kinds of conflict, danger, and potential for general bodily harm. So why do your characters want to put up with that? What's stopping them from just leaving? Certainly, you can have a story where the character is given no choice. If they're trapped on a sinking ship, or if they've wandered into some kind of interdimensional portal, then even if they want to leave, they may not be able to. But for many stories, you need something beyond physical confinement in order to keep the character involved. Now, the obvious answer here is that you, the author, have decided that that character needs to be part of the story, and so they're going to be part of it. But that decision on its own can be problematic for a few reasons. It is incredibly important to develop an internal reason that that character is taking part in the story. A character who is just sort of cast into the story because somebody needs to be cast into the story is going to rob that story of much of its impact. These are the kinds of stories that end up feeling flat, like the characters are just making the plot happen for reasons. Failing to properly anchor a character into the story by giving them reasons to be involved will have negative impacts on both the story and the characters. And the elements of a character that usually bind them to the story are the motivations, goals, and flaws of that character. Without these elements well defined, the character is not really going to have a reason to be in the story at all. So let's talk about how motivations, goals, and flaws work to anchor your character into the story and not just run off like a cat with a piece of pizza. And yes, that is a true story. Duncan has done that. This is sort of a strange angle to approach these elements of a character from, but I think looking at this stuff in the context of how it binds a character to the story is important and will allow us to discuss these things from a different perspective. Let's start by talking about motivation. If you're a regular viewer, you've probably heard me harp on character motivation before. Hell, I do it often enough, you probably don't even need to be a regular. Motivation is a central element of any well-rounded character. It's the meaning that that character assigns to their life. It's the expression of their core values and beliefs. Motivation is related to, but not the same thing as a goal. Talk about that in a little bit. Motivation is often the driver behind the goals. It's usually a bit more nebulous and not something that can just be completed the way that a goal can. Revenge is an example of a motivation. Murder is a goal that's related to that motivation. Since motivation is so important to a character, they will often wade into danger if it means they can work towards whatever their motivation is. Following their motivation explains why a character might be trudging across the desert, or fighting aliens on a distant planet, or working a soul-crushing office job. It's because doing these difficult things is very important to their own internal value system. And that choice doesn't need to be rational. It's quite common to have motivations that are ultimately unhealthy for the character. Whether this is derived from a skewed worldview or some kind of past trauma, the character can choose to be a part of the story, even if it's not a great place for them to be. However, even a well-developed motivation may not necessarily be enough to bind a character to a specific story. That's where goals come in. Where motivations are broader, underlying reasons that the characters do what they do, goals are specific, tangible tasks that characters set for themselves in response to that motivation. If a character is seeking revenge as a motivation, their goals might be to cut their target's brakes, or order 100 pizzas delivered to their apartment, or, Each of these goals, theoretically, can only be accomplished within the bounds of the story the character is in. The motivation is often tied to specific locations or people. Take your grizzled detective character. I always describe the detectives as grizzled. Take your wide-eyed, optimistic detective character. They might have a motivation to protect their home or maintain law and justice, which leads them to their goal of catching criminals in their hometown. While they could technically protect any town in the world, their personal motivation links them to that location. If a character is motivated to protect their family, they likely only have one of those, which is going to tie them to a specific family. Although I guess they could have multiple families. If the characters have goals which pertain to your story, and those goals derive from that character's motivations, then it makes sense for them to be part of that story. We've talked so far about a lot of the positive reasons that a character is part of the story. Working towards motivations, achieving goals that are important to you are all good things to do, things that will benefit that character. Now let's talk about some of the more negative reasons that a character can be part of the story. That's right, it's time to talk about flaws. This is floss, closest prop I could find. You might say my prop selection was a little bit flawed. Nobody's perfect, and flaws are usually what makes someone imperfect. Flaws add depth to characters and make them more relatable and, in a lot of cases, likable. Readers like to read about characters who are working to improve themselves and overcome their flaws, which is why overcoming a flaw is usually such a crucial element in a character's journey. Flaws are also one reason why a character could be part of a story. A vengeful attitude might force a character into a revenge plot. An inability to get past a failed relationship might lead them to pursue someone through a romantic arc. Past mistakes in their life might force them on a travel log to go remedy those mistakes. There's all sorts of reasons that a character's flaws can give them a personal connection to the plot. Flaws often impact motivations and goals, which cause the character to pursue things that are out of reach or ultimately non-beneficial or even irrational. Flaws can also trap a character in a given situation. Maybe they don't believe in themselves enough, or they don't have the insight to improve their situation, and that also locks them into the story. Using flaws to anchor a character into a story creates some interesting opportunities. By their very nature, flaws are weaknesses for the character, and if that's what ties them to the story, it's naturally going to create conflict. I think what we discussed today is really important. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have spent the last 45 minutes filming this. Understanding not just who your characters are, but also why they pursue the things that they pursue and why they should be a part of the story that you're making them a part of is really important. The best stories have characters who are a natural fit for the plot and the goals that they want to achieve. So it's likely worth spending some time to think about the things that are keeping your characters in the story. Just like I've hoped you've kept watching this video, even though the transition to the conclusion wasn't all that great. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. Next week we'll be continuing on our guide to characters, but I'm not going to tell you what we're going to talk about. I'm going to keep it a secret. Until then, why not check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. I post new videos every Wednesday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.